When a respected community leader received an invitation to speak at the local elementary school's diversity assembly, she never imagined that her presence would ignite a firestorm of prejudice that would test an entire town's character. Usha Vance, a successful attorney and devoted mother of three, had been quietly making a difference in her community for years, but nothing could have prepared her for the confrontation that was about to unfold. Sometimes the most ordinary moments reveal the extraordinary depths of human nature, and what started as a simple school event was about to become a defining moment for everyone involved. Before we dive into this powerful story of grace under pressure, let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. The morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of Maplewood Elementary School, where the sweet scent of blooming cherry trees mixed with the familiar sounds of children's laughter echoing from the playground. Inside a brick building that had served the community for over 40 years, teachers were putting the finishing touches on decorations for the upcoming diversity assembly. Colorful banners celebrating different cultures hung from the ceiling of the multi-purpose room, while student artwork depicting families from around the world lined the hallways. It was meant to be a celebration of the rich tapestry of backgrounds that made up their small town, a moment for children to learn about the beauty of differences and the strength found in unity. Principal Margaret Ibarra had spent weeks planning this special event, reaching out to various community members who could share their unique stories and experiences with the students. She believed deeply in the power of education to build bridges and foster understanding among young minds. Among the speakers she had invited was Usha Vance, whose impressive background as both an attorney and an active volunteer in local charities made her an ideal candidate to inspire the children. Usha had graciously accepted the invitation, planning to speak about her journey from childhood to her current role in the community, emphasizing the importance of hard work, education, and treating others with respect, regardless of their background. As the day of the assembly approached, word had spread throughout the tight-knit community about the upcoming event. Most parents were excited about the opportunity for their children to hear from successful local figures, but not everyone shared this enthusiasm. In the shadows of the community's apparent harmony, there existed pockets of resistance to change, people who viewed any celebration of diversity as a threat to their traditional way of life. These individuals often kept their opinions to themselves, sharing their concerns only in private conversations or closed social media groups where they felt safe to express their true feelings without public scrutiny. Amanda Gutierrez, a mother of two children at Maplewood Elementary, had been growing increasingly agitated as she learned more details about the diversity assembly. She had moved to this particular neighborhood precisely because she believed it represented what she considered to be traditional American values, and the idea of exposing her children to what she saw as unnecessary emphasis on cultural differences deeply troubled her. Amanda had been vocal in her opposition to various school initiatives over the years, from updated history textbooks that included more diverse perspectives to the school's decision to serve halal options in the cafeteria to accommodate Muslim students. On the evening before the assembly, Amanda sat at her kitchen table, scrolling through the school's website and reading about Usha Vance's background. The more she learned about the accomplished attorney, the more her anxiety grew. She saw Usha's success not as an inspiration, but as a symbol of what she perceived to be the changing face of America, a change she was determined to resist. Amanda's worldview had been shaped by years of consuming media that reinforced her fears about cultural dilution and the supposed threats posed by immigrants and their descendants, regardless of how long they had been part of the American fabric. Her husband, Kevin Escobar, tried to reason with her as she paced around their living room, expressing her concerns about the upcoming assembly. He reminded her that Usha was a respected member of their community, someone who had contributed significantly to local charities and had always conducted herself with dignity and professionalism. But Amanda's mind was already made up, her perspective clouded by prejudices that ran deeper than rational argument could reach. She had convinced herself that she was protecting not just her own children, but the entire community from what she saw as an insidious influence. Meanwhile, across town, Usha was putting the final touches on her presentation for the next day's assembly. Sitting in her home office, surrounded by law books and family photos, she carefully reviewed her notes, wanting to ensure that her message would be both age-appropriate and inspiring for the young audience. She had chosen to focus on themes of perseverance, education, and community service, drawing from her own experiences growing up in a family that had always emphasized the importance of hard work and giving back to society. Her presentation included stories about overcoming challenges, the value of diverse perspectives in problem-solving, and the importance of treating everyone with kindness and respect. Usha's husband, who had been supportive of her community involvement from the beginning, helped her practice her speech, offering suggestions to make it more engaging for elementary school students. Their own children, who attended a different school in the district, were proud of their mother's invitation to speak and had helped her select stories that they thought other kids would find interesting and relatable. The family had always been actively involved in community service, from volunteering at local food banks to participating in neighborhood cleanup efforts, and Usha saw this speaking opportunity as another way to contribute positively to the place. They called home. As evening fell, the Vance household was filled with the usual sounds of family life preparation for the next day, homework being completed, and the gentle hum of dinner conversation. Usha felt a sense of excitement and responsibility about her upcoming presentation, knowing that she had the opportunity to plant seeds of inspiration in young minds and perhaps encourage some of the children to pursue their own dreams with greater confidence. She had no idea that her very presence at the school was being viewed by some as controversial, no inkling that her invitation to speak was being seen as anything other than the honor she considered it to be. The night passed quietly for most of the community, but Amanda Gutierrez found herself unable to sleep, her mind racing with scenarios and arguments she might present if given the opportunity. She had decided that she could not simply stand by and allow what she saw as an inappropriate influence to go unchallenged. Amanda spent hours crafting what she believed to be compelling arguments about why the school should reconsider its choice of speakers, though her reasoning was based more on her personal biases than any legitimate concerns about Usha's qualifications or character. In her restless state, Amanda began reaching out to other parents through text messages and social media, trying to gauge whether anyone else shared her concerns about the upcoming assembly. She was disappointed to find that most parents either supported the event enthusiastically or were simply indifferent to the choice of speakers. A few parents expressed mild confusion about her objections, pointing out that Usha Vance was well known in the community for her professional achievements and charitable work, making her an obvious choice for such an event. The lack of support for her position only intensified Amanda's conviction that she needed to take a stand, that someone had to speak up for what she believed were the community's true values. She began to see herself as a lone voice of reason in a world that had lost its way, a protector of traditions that were under assault from forces she couldn't quite articulate but deeply feared. This mindset transformed her anxiety into a sense of righteous purpose, convincing her that her planned confrontation would be not just justified, but necessary. As dawn broke over Maplewood Elementary School, the stage was set for a confrontation that would reveal the true character of both the individuals involved, and the community that would witness it. Teachers arrived early to make final preparations. Students looked forward to a break from their regular routine, and parents began to consider whether they might attend the assembly to support their children and the speakers. Among them, two women prepared for the day ahead with vastly different intentions, neither fully aware of how their interaction would soon become a defining moment that would test the values and character of their entire community. The morning air carried the promise of spring and renewal, but it also carried the tension of an approaching storm that would challenge everyone involved to examine their own beliefs and decide what kind of community they truly wanted to be. The morning of the Diversity Assembly arrived with a crispness that seemed to energize the entire school community. Students bounded off buses with extra enthusiasm, chattering excitedly about the special event that would break up their regular routine. Teachers greeted each other in the hallways with knowing smiles, proud of the educational opportunity they were providing for their students. The multi-purpose room had been transformed overnight, with additional chairs arranged in neat rows and a simple podium positioned at the front where the speakers would address the eager young audience. Everything seemed perfectly orchestrated for what should have been a memorable and positive experience for everyone involved. Usha Vance arrived at the school 30 minutes before the scheduled start time, her professional attire impeccable and her materials neatly organized in a leather portfolio. She had chosen to wear a navy blue blazer paired with a crisp white shirt, an outfit that projected both authority and approachability. As she walked through the main entrance, she was greeted warmly by Principal Margaret Ibarra, who expressed her gratitude for Usha's willingness to participate in the assembly. The two women reviewed the program schedule briefly, with Principal Ibarra explaining that Usha would be the second speaker, following a brief introduction about the importance of diversity and community involvement. The first signs of trouble emerged as parents began arriving for the assembly. While most entered the building with pleasant expressions and casual conversation, Amanda Gutierrez appeared in the parking lot with a determined stride and a furrowed brow that suggested she was on a mission. She had dressed deliberately for the occasion, choosing clothing that she felt represented what she considered to be proper American values, and she carried herself with the bearing of someone who believed she was about to perform an important civic duty. Her husband Kevin had tried one final time that morning to dissuade her from whatever she was planning, but Amanda had dismissed his concerns with a wave of her hand and a declaration that someone needed to stand up for what was right. As Amanda entered the school building, she immediately began scanning the hallways and common areas, clearly searching for someone specific. Her eyes narrowed as she spotted Usha Vance speaking quietly with Principal Ibarra near the entrance to the multi-purpose room. The sight of her target seemed to intensify Amanda's resolve, and she began walking purposefully in their direction, her footsteps echoing against the polished floors with increasing urgency. The parents who noticed her approach sensed that something unusual was about to happen, though none could have predicted the nature or intensity of the confrontation that was brewing. Usha noticed Amanda's approach peripherally, but continued her conversation with Principal Ibarra, assuming that the woman was simply another parent arriving for the assembly. She had no reason to expect any kind of hostile encounter, given her positive experiences with the community over the years. When Amanda finally reached them, her first words shattered the morning's peaceful atmosphere like a stone thrown through glass. "Excuse me," Amanda said loudly, her voice carrying an edge that immediately drew the attention of everyone within earshot. "I need to speak with whoever is responsible for allowing inappropriate speakers at this school." Principal Ibarra looked genuinely confused by the interruption, glancing between Amanda and Usha as she tried to process what was happening. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Gutierrez, but I'm not sure I understand your concern," she replied diplomatically, though her professional instincts were already alerting her to potential trouble. Usha remained calm but alert, her legal training having taught her to assess situations carefully before responding. She could sense the hostility radiating from Amanda, but chose to remain silent for the moment, allowing Principal Ibarra to handle what appeared to be a parent complaint. Amanda's voice grew, louder and more aggressive, as she continued her unexpected assault. "This woman," she said, gesturing dismissively toward Usha, "has no business speaking to our children about American values. She doesn't represent what this community stands for, and I won't have my children exposed to her foreign influence." The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud, their implications clear to everyone who heard them. Several parents who had been nearby stopped their conversations and turned to stare, their expressions ranging from shock to embarrassment at Amanda's public display of prejudice. The accusation was so unexpected and baseless that it took Usha a moment to fully process what she had just heard. Here was a woman she had never met, making assumptions about her background and character based on nothing more than her appearance and name. Usha's first instinct was to respond with the kind of sharp legal argument that would have dismantled Amanda's position in seconds, but she quickly recognized that this was neither the time nor the place for such a confrontation. Instead, she took a deep breath and chose to respond with the kind of grace and dignity that would ultimately prove far more powerful than any aggressive rebuttal. "I'm sorry you feel that way," Usha said quietly, her voice steady and controlled despite the obvious injustice of the attack. "I've lived in this community for over a decade, and I've always tried to contribute positively to it. I'm here today because Principal Ibarra felt that my experiences might be valuable for the children to hear." Her response was measured and professional, but it carried an underlying strength that made it clear she would not be intimidated or driven away by Amanda's hostility. Amanda, however, was far from finished with her public display of prejudice. Emboldened by what she interpreted as weakness in Usha's calm response, she pressed her attack with even greater vehemence. "I don't care how long you've lived here," she declared, her voice rising to a level that could be heard throughout the hallway. "This is a Christian community with traditional American values, and we don't need outsiders telling our children what to think or how to behave. You people come here and try to change everything to suit your own agenda, but we won't stand for it anymore." The phrase "you people" landed like a slap across the face of everyone who heard it, its implications unmistakable and deeply offensive. Several parents gasped audibly, while others shook their heads in disgust at Amanda's blatant display of bigotry. Principal Ibarra's face flushed with a combination of anger and embarrassment, recognizing that she needed to intervene immediately to prevent the situation from escalating further. Children were beginning to arrive in the area, and the last thing anyone wanted was for them to witness this ugly confrontation between adults. Usha felt the familiar sting of discrimination that she had experienced occasionally throughout her life, but she also felt something else, a profound sadness for Amanda and for the community that was being forced to witness this display of hatred. She had encountered prejudice before, both in her professional and personal life, but it never became easier to bear. What struck her most powerfully in this moment was not the personal attack on her character, but the realization that Amanda's children were likely absorbing these same toxic attitudes at home, perpetuating a cycle of prejudice that could poison future generations. "Mrs. Gutierrez," Principal Ibarra said firmly, stepping slightly between the two women in an attempt to diffuse the confrontation. "I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice and reconsider your words. Mrs. Vance is a respected member of our community who has volunteered her time to speak with our students. If you have concerns about the assembly, we can discuss them privately in my office after the event. Her tone carried the authority of someone who had dealt with difficult parents before, but also conveyed her obvious displeasure with Amanda's behavior. Amanda, however, seemed to interpret the principal's intervention as evidence of a broader conspiracy rather than appropriate professional management of a disruptive situation. "Of course you're defending her," she replied with a bitter laugh. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're all working together to push your agenda on our children, but some of us still care about preserving American values." Her words revealed the depth of her paranoia and the extent to which her worldview had been distorted by prejudice and fear. By this point, a small crowd had gathered to witness the confrontation, including several teachers who had emerged from their classrooms to investigate the commotion. Among them was Andrea Miller, a fourth-grade teacher who had worked at the school for 15 years and had always admired Usha's community involvement. She looked horrified by Amanda's behavior and clearly wanted to intervene, but professional protocol required her to allow the principal to handle the situation unless specifically asked for assistance. What struck many of the observers was the stark contrast between the two women's behavior during this confrontation. While Amanda grew increasingly agitated and hostile, her voice rising and her gestures becoming more dramatic, Usha remained remarkably composed and dignified. She stood with perfect posture, her hands clasped calmly in front of her, and her expression reflecting disappointment rather than anger. This contrast only served to highlight the unreasonableness of Amanda's position and the groundless nature of her attacks. The confrontation was beginning to attract the attention of early arriving students, and Principal Ibarra realized that she needed to bring the situation under control immediately. The last thing the school needed was for children to witness adults behaving badly, particularly given that the assembly was supposed to celebrate diversity and mutual respect. She made a quick decision to move the conversation to a more private location, hoping to minimize the disruption to the school's normal operations. "I think we need to take this discussion to my office," Principal Ibarra announced with finality, gesturing toward the administrative wing of the building. "Mrs. Vance, if you could wait in the teacher's lounge for a few minutes, I'd like to speak with Mrs. Gutierrez privately before we proceed with the assembly." Her suggestion was really more of a directive, delivered with the kind of professional authority that made it clear the public confrontation needed to end immediately. Usha nodded graciously and began to move toward the teacher's lounge. But Amanda was not finished with her public display of prejudice. "Don't you walk away from me," she called after Usha, her voice carrying a tone of command that was both inappropriate and ineffective. "We're not done discussing this situation. I have every right to know why this school is promoting un-American influences to our children." The absurdity of Amanda's position was becoming increasingly apparent to everyone present. Here was Usha Vance, a successful attorney who had been born and raised in America, who had attended American universities, who practiced American law, and who had spent years contributing to her American community, being accused of promoting un-American influences. The irony was lost on Amanda, whose prejudice had blinded her to the obvious contradictions in her own arguments. As Usha continued walking toward the teacher's lounge, she could feel the eyes of dozens of people following her every step. Some looked at her with sympathy and embarrassment about Amanda's behavior, while others seemed curious about how she would respond to such an unprovoked attack. What none of them could have predicted was that Usha's response to this confrontation would ultimately transform not just the immediate situation, but the entire community's understanding of what it means to handle adversity with grace and dignity. The teacher's lounge at Maplewood Elementary had always been a sanctuary of sorts, a place where educators could retreat for a few moments of peace between the controlled chaos of their classrooms. As Usha Vance settled into one of the worn but comfortable chairs near the window, she found herself surrounded by the familiar trappings of school life. A bulletin board covered with inspirational quotes, a coffee maker that had seen better days, and stacks of papers waiting to be graded. The normalcy of the setting provided a stark contrast to the extraordinary situation she had just experienced, and she used these quiet moments to collect her thoughts and consider her next steps. Outside, in the hallway, the aftermath of Amanda's confrontation continued to ripple through the school community. Parents who had witnessed the ugly display were speaking in hushed tones, their expressions ranging from shock to disgust at what they had just seen. Many of them knew Usha by reputation, if not personally, and they found Amanda's accusations not just offensive, but completely bewildering. How could anyone who had lived in the community for any length of time fail to recognize Usha's contributions to local charities, her professional achievements, and her consistently gracious behavior in all her interactions? Daniel Russell, a father of 2 students at the school, approached several other parents who had witnessed the confrontation. "I can't believe what just happened," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "Usha Vance has done more for this community than most of us combined. She organized the legal aid clinic at the community center. She's been volunteering at the food bank for years, and her law firm provides pro bono services to families who can't afford legal help. How can anyone question her commitment to this community?" His words prompted nods of agreement from the other parents, many of whom began sharing their own positive experiences with Usha. Christina Cruz remembered how Usha had helped her navigate a complex legal issue related to her elderly mother's estate, refusing to accept any payment for her assistance. Benjamin Weaver recalled seeing Usha at numerous school events over the years, always supportive and engaged, always treating every child with kindness and respect, regardless of their background. Meanwhile, in Principal Ibarra's office, Amanda was discovering that her expected support was nowhere to be found. Instead of finding a sympathetic ear for her concerns, she encountered a professional educator who was clearly disappointed in her behavior and unwilling to validate her prejudiced perspective. Principal Ibarra had spent her entire career fighting against the kind of discrimination that Amanda was attempting to promote, and she was not about to compromise her principles now. "Mrs. Gutierrez," Principal Ibarra said with controlled firmness, "I need you to understand that your behavior this morning was completely inappropriate and unacceptable. Mrs. Vance is a distinguished member of our community who graciously accepted our invitation to speak with our students. Your public attack on her character was not only unfounded, but deeply offensive to everyone who witnessed it." Amanda, however, remained convinced of the righteousness of her position. "I have every right to question who you allow to influence our children," she replied defensively. "As a parent and a taxpayer, I demand to know why you're promoting divisive speakers who don't share our community's values." Her words revealed the depth of her misunderstanding about both Usha's background and the nature of American values themselves. "Mrs. Vance shares exactly the values we want to promote," Principal Ibarra responded, with patience that she was struggling to maintain. "She represents hard work, education, community service, and professional excellence. She's a role model for what any of our students can achieve with dedication and perseverance. I'm frankly baffled by your objections to her participation in our assembly." The conversation in the principal's office continued for several more minutes, with Amanda becoming increasingly frustrated by her inability to find support for her position. She had convinced herself that other parents shared her concerns, but the reality was that her prejudiced views were not representative of the broader community. Most parents were either supportive of the diversity assembly or simply indifferent to the choice of speakers, viewing it as a routine educational activity rather than some kind of ideological battleground. Back in the teacher's lounge, Usha was joined by Andrea Miller, the fourth-grade teacher who had witnessed the confrontation in the hallway. Andrea's face still showed the shock and embarrassment she felt about Amanda's behavior, and she immediately began apologizing on behalf of the school community. "Mrs. Vance, I am so sorry about what just happened," she said with genuine distress. "Please don't think that woman represents how any of us feel about you or your participation in our assembly." Usha smiled warmly at the teacher's concern, appreciating the gesture of support but not requiring it for her own peace of mind. "Thank you, Mrs. Miller, but please don't feel that you need to apologize for someone else's behavior. I've encountered this kind of prejudice before, unfortunately, and I understand that it reflects the speaker's limitations rather than any truth about me or my community contributions." Her response revealed something remarkable about Usha's character. Despite being the target of an unprovoked and deeply hurtful attack, she refused to allow Amanda's prejudice to diminish her own sense of self-worth or her commitment to the community she served. This kind of emotional resilience doesn't develop overnight. It's forged through years of experience, both personal and professional, and strengthened by a deep understanding of one's own values and purpose. As they continued talking, other teachers began filtering into the lounge, each expressing their support for Usha and their embarrassment about Amanda's behavior. Elizabeth Martinez, who taught second grade, shared how excited her students were to hear from successful community members like Usha. Holly Peterson, a kindergarten teacher, mentioned that she had been looking forward to the assembly because she believed exposure to diverse role models was crucial for her young students' development. What emerged from these conversations was a clear picture of a school community that valued diversity, inclusion, and mutual respect. Amanda's confrontational behavior was not representative of the broader community's values. Instead, it stood out as an aberration that highlighted the contrast between her prejudiced worldview and the more inclusive perspective embraced by most of the school's families and staff. During this time, word of the confrontation was spreading throughout the school and into the broader community through text messages and social media posts. Parents who hadn't witnessed the incident firsthand were learning about Amanda's attack on Usha, and the response was overwhelmingly negative. Many community members who knew Usha professionally or personally were expressing outrage at the treatment she had received, while others were simply embarrassed that such blatant prejudice had been displayed so publicly in their community. Dr. Melissa Cooper, a local physician who had worked with Usha on several community health initiatives, posted on the school's parent Facebook group, "I am absolutely appalled by what happened at school this morning. Usha Vance is one of the most dedicated and professional people I know, and she has contributed immeasurably to our community. Anyone who questions her commitment to American values clearly doesn't know her or understand what those values actually represent." Her post quickly generated dozens of supportive comments from other parents and community members, creating a digital chorus of voices defending Usha and condemning Amanda's behavior. The online response served as a powerful reminder that prejudice and hatred, while loud and attention-grabbing, are often not representative of a community's true character. Meanwhile, Amanda's conversation with Principal Ibarra was reaching its conclusion, though not in the way she had hoped. Instead of finding validation for her concerns, she was being informed that her behavior was unacceptable and that she would need to issue a public apology if she wanted to remain in good standing with the school community. Principal Ibarra made it clear that the Diversity Assembly would proceed as planned, with Usha Vance as one of the featured speakers. "I strongly encourage you to reconsider your position, Mrs. Gutierrez," Principal Ibarra said as their meeting came to an end. Mrs. Vance has handled your unprovoked attack with remarkable grace and dignity, and I hope you'll take this opportunity to reflect on your behavior and perhaps learn something from her example. Amanda left the principal's office feeling frustrated and isolated, realizing that her expected support had failed to materialize. As she walked through the hallways of the school, she could sense the disapproving looks and hushed conversations that followed in her wake. The community response to her behavior was making it clear that she had badly misjudged the situation and that her prejudiced views were not welcome in this educational environment. As the time for the assembly approached, Usha made a decision that would define not only her own character, but also serve as a powerful lesson for everyone who would witness what happened next. Instead of allowing Amanda's attack to diminish her enthusiasm for speaking with the students, she chose to use the experience as an opportunity to demonstrate the very values she had planned to discuss in her presentation: resilience, dignity, and the importance of responding to hatred with grace. When Principal Ibarra returned to inform her that the assembly would proceed as scheduled, Usha was ready with a response that surprised even the experienced educator. "I'd like to make a small addition to my presentation, if that's acceptable," Usha said thoughtfully. "I think this morning's events have provided us with a teachable moment that we shouldn't waste." Her request intrigued Principal Ibarra, who was curious about how Usha planned to address what had happened without creating additional controversy or discomfort for the students. When Usha explained her idea, the principal realized that she was about to witness something truly special, a masterclass in turning adversity into opportunity and hatred into a lesson about the power of dignity and grace. The multi-purpose room at Maplewood Elementary had filled with anticipation as students filed in for the diversity assembly, their excited chatter creating a buzz of energy that filled the space from floor to ceiling. Teachers guided their classes to designated seating areas, while parents who had chosen to attend found spots along the walls and in the back rows. The atmosphere should have been purely celebratory, but those who had witnessed or heard about the morning's confrontation carried with them a sense of curiosity about how the events would unfold. Many wondered whether Usha would address what had happened, or if the assembly would proceed as originally planned, with no acknowledgement of Amanda's hostile outburst. Principal Ibarra stepped up to the podium with her characteristic blend of authority and warmth, surveying the assembled crowd of young faces looking up at her expectantly. She had decided to keep her opening remarks brief, focusing on the importance of learning from people with different backgrounds and experiences. "Today we have the privilege of hearing from some remarkable members of our community," she began, her voice carrying clearly throughout the room. "These speakers have agreed to share their stories with us because they believe in the power of education and the importance of inspiring young minds to pursue their dreams." As she introduced the first speaker, a local firefighter who would discuss community service and safety, many of the adults in the room found their attention divided between the presentation and their curiosity about how Usha would handle her upcoming moment at the podium. The firefighter's presentation went smoothly, engaging the students with stories about helping others and the importance of working together as a team. His message resonated well with the young audience, who peppered him with enthusiastic questions about fire trucks and rescue operations. When Principal Ibarra rose to introduce Usha, a subtle tension filled the room among the adults who knew what had transpired earlier. Our next speaker is Mrs. Usha Vance, an attorney and longtime member of our community who has dedicated countless hours to helping others through her professional work and volunteer service. She's here today to share some thoughts about education, perseverance, and the importance of treating others with respect and kindness. Usha approached the podium with the same composed dignity she had displayed during Amanda's attack, her presence commanding attention without demanding it. She had chosen to wear the same professional outfit from earlier, refusing to let the morning's events alter her plans or undermine her confidence. As she adjusted the microphone and looked out at the sea of young faces, she made a decision that would transform what could have been a routine school assembly into a powerful lesson about character, resilience, and the true meaning of strength. "Good morning, students and teachers," Usha began, her voice warm and engaging as she established an immediate connection with her audience. "I'm honored to be here with you today, and I want to start by telling you about something that happened to me just a few hours ago, right here in your school." The admission surprised many of the adults in the room, who had expected her to simply proceed with her planned presentation without mentioning the confrontation. She continued with careful deliberation, ensuring that her words would be appropriate for the young audience while still conveying an important message. "This morning, I met someone who had made some assumptions about me based on how I look and what my name sounds like. This person decided that I didn't belong in your community and that I shouldn't be speaking with you today. They were very angry and said some hurtful things, but I want you to know that their words didn't change who I am or what I believe about this wonderful community we all share." The students listened with rapt attention, their young minds processing this unexpected revelation about adult behavior. Many of them had been taught about bullying and the importance of treating others with kindness, but this was perhaps their first exposure to the reality that even adults sometimes fail to live up to these basic principles. The teachers and parents in the room watched with growing admiration as Usha navigated this delicate topic with skill and sensitivity. "Now, you might be wondering why I'm telling you this story," Usha continued, her tone remaining warm and conversational, despite the serious nature of her message. "It's because I want you to understand something very important about how we respond when people treat us unfairly. We always have a choice in these moments. We can respond with anger and try to hurt them back, or we can choose to respond with kindness and dignity. Today, I chose kindness, and I want to explain why." Her decision to frame the morning's events as a teachable moment rather than simply ignoring them demonstrated a level of emotional intelligence and public speaking skill that impressed even the most experienced educators in the room. She was taking what could have been a purely negative experience and transforming it into an opportunity to reinforce the very values the Diversity Assembly was meant to celebrate. When someone treats you badly because of how you look, or where your family comes from, or what your name sounds like, they're usually acting out of fear, Usha explained, her words carefully chosen to be accessible to elementary school students. "They're afraid of things they don't understand, and sometimes people say mean things when they're scared. But here's what I've learned. Responding with kindness and respect is always stronger than responding with anger or meanness." As she spoke, Usha noticed Amanda Gutierrez standing near the back of the room, having apparently decided to attend the assembly despite her earlier confrontation. Amanda's presence could have been intimidating or distracting, but Usha chose to view it as an opportunity to demonstrate her principles in real time. She made eye contact with Amanda briefly, not with hostility or triumph, but with the same gentle strength she was describing to the students. "I want to tell you about my journey to this community and why I'm so grateful to be here," Usha continued, transitioning into the personal stories she had originally planned to share. "My parents taught me that America is a place where anyone can succeed if they work hard, get a good education, and treat other people with respect. They taught me that being American means embracing people from all different backgrounds and working together to make our communities stronger." Her words carried particular power given the context of the morning's events. Here was someone who had just been attacked for supposedly not representing American values, calmly and eloquently articulating what those values actually mean in practice. The irony was not lost on the adults in the room, many of whom found themselves reflecting on their own understanding of patriotism and community spirit. Usha shared stories from her childhood about the importance of education, describing how her parents had sacrificed to ensure she had opportunities to learn and grow. She talked about her experiences in law school, the challenges she had overcome, and the satisfaction she found in using her legal skills to help others. Throughout her presentation, she wove in messages about perseverance, kindness, and the importance of standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Sometimes people will try to tell you that you don't belong somewhere, or that you're not good enough, or that your dreams are too big, she told the students, her voice growing stronger with conviction. When that happens, I want you to remember that your worth isn't determined by what other people think of you. Your worth comes from your character, your actions, and your commitment to treating others with respect and kindness. The students were clearly engaged with her message, many of them nodding along as she spoke. Several teachers noticed students sitting up straighter in their chairs, apparently inspired by Usha's words and her example of grace under pressure. The presentation was becoming exactly what Principal Ibarra had hoped for when she first invited Usha to speak, an inspiring message delivered by someone who embodied the values she was promoting. As Usha's presentation continued, she began to involve the students more directly, asking them questions about their own experiences with kindness and respect. How many of you have ever helped someone who was different from you? She asked, and dozens of small hands shot up around the room. How did it make you feel when you helped them? The students eagerly shared stories about helping classmates, welcoming new students, and standing up for others who were being treated unfairly. The interactive portion of her presentation created a powerful atmosphere of engagement and learning. Students were not just passively listening to an adult lecture, they were actively participating in a conversation about values and character that would likely stay with them long after the assembly ended. This was education at its finest, not just the transmission of information, but the cultivation of wisdom and character. Near the end of her presentation, Usha returned to the theme she had introduced at the beginning. Remember what I told you about the person who was unkind to me this morning. I want you to know that I'm not angry with that person. Instead, I feel sorry for them because they're missing out on the chance to know wonderful people just because those people might look different or have different names. When we close our hearts to others, we make our own lives smaller and sadder. Her words carried a profound message about forgiveness and understanding that resonated throughout the room. Even some of the adults found themselves moved by her perspective, recognizing the wisdom in choosing compassion over resentment. Amanda Gutierrez, still standing at the back of the room, appeared increasingly uncomfortable as she listened to Usha's gracious response to the morning's events. As Usha concluded her presentation, she offered the students a final challenge. I want each of you to think about how you can make our community stronger and more welcoming. Maybe you can be extra kind to a new student, or help someone who's having trouble with their homework, or stand up for someone who's being treated unfairly. Remember, true strength isn't about being mean to others or trying to make them feel bad. True strength is about lifting others up and making the world a little bit better every day. The applause that followed was genuine and enthusiastic, with students, teachers, and parents alike recognizing that they had witnessed something special. Usha had not only delivered an inspiring message, but had done so with a grace and dignity that transformed a potentially negative situation into a powerful teaching moment. Her response to adversity had become a masterclass in character, demonstrating that the highest form of strength is often found in gentleness, and the most powerful response to hatred is unwavering kindness. As students began filing out of the Multi-purpose room, many of them approached Usha to thank her personally or ask additional questions. Their enthusiasm and engagement were clear evidence that her message had resonated deeply, planting seeds of wisdom that would likely influence their behavior and attitudes for years to come. In turning her moment of trial into a lesson for others, Usha had achieved something far more valuable than simply delivering a successful presentation. She had demonstrated the transformative power of grace under fire and the enduring strength of character over conflict.